an original story narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. Agnes Thorne stood in the kitchen of Hatherley at dawn, with her medical bag already packed, and a sealed vial of poison pressed against her ribs beneath her coat. Mrs. Liddell blocked the servant's door with her broad frame and steady hands that had kneaded bread in this house for 30 years. From the corridor beyond came a scullery maid's voice, high and uncertain. "Does the Duke know she's leaving?" Mrs. Liddell's answer came low and deliberate, each word a stone dropped into still water. "Why do you think he locked the gates?" Agnes felt the floor shift beneath her feet as the cook's face changed from authority to something raw and terrible. "And the person who mixed that child's tonic every evening for 18 months, the one you've been testing in secret, was me." The kitchen was silent, except for the crack of the fire and the distant sound of someone drawing water in the scullery. Agnes stood with one hand on the strap of her bag and the other pressed flat against the table edge. She had planned this departure carefully, before sunrise, before the household stirred, before anyone could ask questions she was not prepared to answer. Mrs. Liddell had not moved from the doorway. "Sit down, girl. I cannot stay. You can, and you will. Because if you walk out that gate with what you know, Rose Ashworth drinks her evening tonic tonight, and there is no one left in this house who understands what is in it." Agnes met the cook's eyes. "You knew." "I know now." Mrs. Liddell's voice was steady, but her hands were not. "I did not know 18 months ago when Mr. Stephen first gave me the recipe. I did not know 6 months ago when the child began to worsen. I did not question it because he is a gentleman, and I am a cook, and it is not my place to ask why a tonic requires antimony when the label says valerian and honey." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. "You read the ingredients." "I read them yesterday, after you asked me to save a sample from the preparation I made, without his additions. I compared them side by side in the still room when the house was asleep. I am not a physician, Miss Thorne, but I am not a fool, and I have been the instrument." Agnes set her bag on the table. The vial against her ribs felt heavier than it had a moment ago. "If you knew yesterday, why did you not go to the Duke?" "Because the Duke has known longer than I have, and he has done nothing. He sent for me. Yes, he sent for you. He locked the gates 3 days after you arrived. He watches his cousin like a man watching a serpent. But he has not acted, and I need to know why before I decide whether to trust him with the truth I just gave you." Agnes pulled out the chair and sat. Mrs. Liddell moved from the doorway and took the seat across from her. The cook's hands were red and scarred from years of labor. She folded them on the table with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime controlling what her body revealed. "Tell me what you know," Mrs. Liddell said. "All of it, and I will tell you what I have seen." Agnes reached into her coat and withdrew the vial. She set it on the table between them. The liquid inside was pale gold in the early light. "This is a sample of the tonic Rose received 4 nights ago. I intercepted it before it reached her room. The preparation contains antimony in a dose calculated to sicken, but not kill. Chronic exposure over months. The symptoms mimic consumption, weight loss, weakness, digestive distress. But the pattern is wrong. I have seen this before." "Where?" "A mining village in Derbyshire. 2 years ago. 3 children, all with identical symptoms. The source was contaminated water from a nearby smelting operation. The progression was the same. The treatment was removal from exposure and time." Mrs. Liddell stared at the vial. "How long does she have?" "If the exposure continues, months, perhaps a year. The damage is cumulative. But if it stops, if she is given clean preparations and time to recover, she will survive. And you were leaving." "I was taking the evidence to a magistrate in the next county. Someone outside the Duke's influence. Why not go to him directly?" Agnes hesitated. This was the question she had been asking herself for 6 days. "Because I do not know if he is complicit." Mrs. Liddell's expression did not change. "You think the Duke is poisoning his own ward. I think powerful men do not lock gates and summon physicians in secret, unless they have something to hide. I think the Duke watches his cousin with suspicion, but does not act. I think Rose calls him by his title, and Stephen by his name. And I do not understand why a man would allow a child he claims to care for to suffer, unless he gains something from her suffering, or unless he is trapped." Agnes looked up sharply. Mrs. Liddell leaned forward. "I have worked in this house since before the Duke inherited. I knew his mother. I knew Ellen Brooke. The name meant nothing to Agnes. She waited. Ellen was a linen maid's daughter, 17 when she came to work here, 18 when she died in childbirth. The Dowager Duchess told the household the child was a distant cousin's orphan. The Duke was 25. He had just buried the girl he loved, and the mother who controlled him, in equal measure. He did not fight the fiction. Agnes felt something cold settle in her chest. Rose is his daughter. I have no proof, but I have eyes, and I have watched that man sit beside her bed every night she has been ill for 7 years. A guardian does not keep that vigil. A father does. If she is his daughter, why does he not claim her? Because claiming her now, after 7 years of pretending otherwise, would destroy his credibility in any court in England, and Mr. Stephen Ashworth knows it. Agnes stared at the vial on the table. The pieces were shifting into a pattern she had not anticipated. Stephen is the heir presumptive. He was, until Rose. But if Rose is illegitimate, she has no legal claim, but she has a moral one. And if the Duke were to marry and legitimize her, or claim her publicly and fight for her recognition, Stephen's inheritance would be threatened. So Stephen has been removing the threat slowly, quietly, with a tonic I prepared with my own hands, because I did not ask the questions you asked. The cook's voice broke on the last words. Agnes reached across the table and covered the woman's folded hands with her own. You could not have known. I should have questioned. I should have wondered why a child's tonic required ingredients I had never used before. I should have asked why Mr. Stephen insisted on supervising the preparation himself. But I did not, because he is a gentleman, and I am a cook. The system that made me bow to his authority is the same system that allowed him to use me as his instrument. Agnes tightened her grip. Then help me prove it. Mrs. Liddell looked up. Her eyes were dry, but her face was drawn. How? Save every preparation you make from this day forward. Clean tonics. Document the ingredients and the date. Seal them and store them somewhere Stephen cannot find. I will continue testing what Rose receives. When we have enough evidence to show the pattern, when we can prove that the preparations you make, without his interference, do not sicken her, we will have proof that does not require the Duke to expose Rose's parentage. And if Stephen discovers what we are doing, then we will have a different problem. But I cannot leave. You were right. If I walk out that gate, Rose drinks the tonic tonight, and I will not allow that. Mrs. Liddell nodded slowly. She stood and moved to the hearth, lifting a kettle that had been warming on the edge of the fire. She poured 2 cups of tea with steady hands and set one in front of Agnes. 3 weeks ago, the cook said quietly, you arrived at the servants' entrance with 1 bag and a letter from a physician in York. You examined the child and asked more questions in 4 days than 4 physicians asked in 4 years. The Duke watches you the way he watches his cousin, but differently. Agnes wrapped her hands around the cup. The warmth was a small comfort against the cold weight of what she had just agreed to. I need to know if he can be trusted. So do I. But I know this. He sent for you. He locked the gates. And he has not interfered with your work. A guilty man would have sent you away the moment you started asking about the tonic. A trapped man would keep you close and pray you find the answer. He cannot speak aloud. Agnes drank the tea. It was strong and bitter, and exactly what she needed. Then we build the case, and we do not tell him until we have proof he cannot ignore. Mrs. Liddell raised her cup in a gesture that was half salute, half prayer, to questions that should have been asked 18 months ago, to asking them now. They drank in silence as the sun rose over Hatherley, and the gates remained locked. 3 weeks earlier, Agnes had arrived in a hired cart with rain, turning the gravel drive to mud. The driver left her bag at the servants' entrance and departed without waiting for payment. The housekeeper, a tall woman with iron-gray hair and a face that revealed nothing, opened the door before Agnes could knock. You are the physician. I am a physician. I was sent by Mr. Alderton. The Duke is in the east wing. 4 o'clock. You will examine the child first. The housekeeper turned and walked into the house without waiting for acknowledgement. Agnes followed, her coat dripping water onto the flagstones. The corridor was dim and cold. The walls were lined with portraits of men in military dress and women in silk, who stared down with expressions of permanent disapproval. She was shown to a small room on the 2nd floor. A fire burned in the grate, but the warmth had not yet reached the corners. A maid brought water and left without speaking. Agnes removed her wet coat and opened her medical bag. The tools inside were clean and carefully wrapped. She had carried them for 3 years across 15 counties. They were the only inheritance she had kept when she walked away from her family. At 2:30, the housekeeper returned. "The child is awake. Follow me." Rose Ashworth's room was larger than Agnes's, but just as cold. The girl sat in a chair by the window, with a blanket across her lap. She was small for 6 years old, too thin. Her skin had the grayish cast Agnes had learned to recognize as chronic illness. But her eyes were alert and gray, and they followed Agnes with interest as she entered. "Hello, Rose. My name is Miss Thorne. I am a physician. I have come to see if I can help you feel better." The child tilted her head. "Are you going to bleed me?" "No, Dr. Cartwright bled me. It made me feel worse." "Then Dr. Cartwright was wrong. May I sit beside you?" Rose nodded. Agnes pulled a stool close and set her bag on the floor. She took the child's wrist gently and counted the pulse. Too fast. She lifted the girl's eyelids and examined the whites of her eyes, faintly yellow. She asked Rose to open her mouth and looked at her tongue, coated and pale. "Does your stomach hurt?" "Sometimes." "When?" "In the evening, after my tonic." Agnes kept her expression neutral. "What does the tonic taste like?" "Sweet, but wrong. Like honey that has been left too long in the jar." "Do you like it?" "No. But Mr. Stevens says it will make me strong." Agnes set the child's hand back in her lap and smiled. "I am going to examine everything you eat and drink, and I am going to find out what is making you feel poorly. Is that all right?" Rose nodded. "Will you make it stop?" "Yes." The child's face relaxed for the first time since Agnes had entered. She reached out and touched the edge of Agnes's sleeve. "You have kind hands." Agnes felt something catch in her chest. She covered the small fingers with her own. "Thank you, Rose. That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." At 4:00, the housekeeper returned and led Agnes to the east wing. The Duke's study was a large room lined with books and maps. A fire burned in the grate. The man standing at the window did not turn when she entered. "Mr. Alderton says you are the best diagnostician he has seen outside a teaching hospital." His voice was controlled, low, the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to command attention. "Mr. Alderton is generous. He also says you are difficult. I ask questions others do not ask. Some find that difficult." He turned. Damien Ashworth was younger than she had expected. 32, perhaps. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it were not so carefully controlled. But his eyes were not controlled. They were the eyes of a man who had not slept in a very long time. "Tell me what is wrong with her." Agnes set her bag on the chair. "I cannot tell you yet, but I can tell you what it is not. It is not consumption." Something shifted in his expression. Relief or fear, she could not tell. For physicians have examined her. All of them said consumption. For physicians were wrong. The symptoms are superficially similar, but the pattern is incorrect. Consumption progresses differently. This is something else. What? I do not know yet, but I will. I need to examine everything she consumes, every meal, every preparation, every tonic, including the one Mr. Ashworth prepares each evening. There, a flicker in his eyes. He had expected this question. He had been waiting for her to ask it, especially that one. Silence. He studied her face with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. She did not look away. "You will have access to the still room, to the kitchens, to Rose's chambers at any hour. Mrs. Liddell will provide whatever you require." "Is there anything else?" "Yes, I need to know who Mr. Ashworth is." "My cousin. He manages the estate accounts and assists with Rose's care." "Why?" "Because I asked him to." "Why does Rose call you your grace and him Mr. Stephen?" The Duke's jaw tightened. "Because that is their relationship." Agnes picked up her bag. "I will begin my examination of the household preparations tomorrow. If you are withholding information that affects the child's treatment, I will discover it, and I will not be gentle when I do." She turned toward the door. His voice stopped her. "Miss Thorne." She looked back. "I sent for you because I need someone who asks the questions others do not ask. Do not stop now." She nodded once and left the room. In the corridor outside, her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her skirt until the tremor stopped. That evening, she met Stephen Ashworth in the kitchens. He was younger than the Duke. Charming. He smiled when he spoke, and his voice was warm and easy. He stood beside Mrs. Liddell as the cook prepared Rose's tonic, measuring ingredients with careful precision. "Miss Thorne, welcome to Hatherley. I understand you will be examining our dear Rose's care. I will be examining everything. Of course, we all want what is best for the child. If there is anything I can do to assist, you need only ask." He handed the prepared tonic to a maid and watched as she carried it toward the stairs. His smile never wavered. But his eyes followed Agnes as she left the kitchen, and the weight of that gaze stayed with her long after she closed the door to her room. Agnes spent the next 6 days in systematic observation. She examined every meal before it reached Rose's room. She tested the water. She reviewed the ingredients in the still room and compared them against the labels on the bottles. She kept a detailed log of Rose's symptoms, when they worsened, when they improved, what preceded each change. On the 3rd day, she found the pattern. Rose's symptoms worsened in the evenings, always after the tonic. The preparation Mrs. Liddell made in the mornings, a simple broth with herbs, caused no distress. But the tonic Stephen supervised each evening was followed within 2 hours by nausea, cramping, and exhaustion. On the 4th day, Agnes intercepted the tonic before it reached Rose's room. She poured a sample into a vial and sealed it. She replaced the tonic with a clean preparation of her own and waited. That night, Rose slept peacefully. No cramping, no nausea. In the morning, she asked for breakfast. On the 5th day, Agnes took the vial to the still room and began her analysis. She had no laboratory, no equipment beyond what she carried in her bag. But she had her training and her memory and 2 years of experience treating metallic poisoning in a Derbyshire mining village. She added a reagent to the sample and watched the liquid darken. The reaction was unmistakable. Antimony. She sat at the still room table with the vial in her hand and felt the full weight of what she had discovered. This was not accidental contamination. This was not a well-meaning error. This was deliberate, calculated. Someone was poisoning Rose Ashworth with a dose designed to sicken, but not kill, and that someone had access to the kitchens, the still room, and the child's trust. She thought of Stephen's smile, his careful supervision, his warm voice and watchful eyes. She thought of the Duke's controlled face and sleepless gaze. She thought of Mrs. Liddell's hands measuring ingredients to a gentleman's recipe, without question, and she understood that she was standing in the center of something far more dangerous than a misdiagnosis. That night, she requested a meeting with the Duke. He received her in his study at 10 o'clock. The fire had burned low. He stood at the window with his back to the room. "You have findings." "Yes, tell me." Agnes set the vial on his desk. "The tonic Rose receives each evening contains antimony. It is a metallic poison. Chronic exposure causes the symptoms she has been experiencing. Acute exposure can be fatal. The dose she has been receiving is carefully calculated to sicken without killing. This is not an accident. This is deliberate poisoning." He did not move, did not turn. His reflection in the window glass was perfectly still. "How long?" "Based on the progression of her symptoms, I would estimate 18 months, perhaps longer. And if it continues, she will die, slowly, over the course of months. The damage is cumulative. Can it be reversed? If the exposure stops, yes, her body will recover given time and proper care. But if it continues, it will not continue." He turned. His face was no longer controlled. It was raw and terrible, and filled with something that looked like grief held at knife point. "Who?" Agnes met his eyes. "You know who. I need you to say it." "Stephen Ashworth. He supervises the preparation. He provides the recipe. He ensures the tonic reaches her room each evening. And he has been doing so for 18 months, while 4 physicians diagnosed consumption and did nothing." The Duke crossed to his desk and picked up the vial. He held it to the light and stared at the contents as though he could see the poison swimming in the liquid. "I cannot accuse him." Agnes felt her hands curl into fists. "Why not?" "Because he has already anticipated that I would. 3 months ago, he filed a petition for Rose's guardianship. The grounds are my excessive and irregular attachment to a distant ward. He has witnesses, documentation, a legal case prepared and waiting. If I accuse him of poisoning, he will claim I am fabricating evidence to eliminate a rival guardian. The courts will investigate. They will examine my household, my relationship with Rose, and they will discover the truth I have been hiding for 7 years." "What truth?" He set the vial down and looked at her. "Rose is my daughter." The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Agnes did not move. Her mother was Ellen Brooke, a linen maid's daughter. She died in childbirth. My mother constructed the fiction that Rose was a distant cousin's orphan. I was 25. I had just lost the woman I loved. I complied because I did not know what else to do, and I have been trapped inside that lie ever since. If you claim her now, I confirm Stephen's allegation. The courts will see a duke who concealed an illegitimate child's parentage for 7 years and exhibited excessive attachment to a ward who is actually his daughter. They will question my judgment, my stability, and they may award guardianship to the man who has been poisoning her. The system I used to hide her has become the weapon he is using to kill her. Agnes stared at him. So you locked the gates. I locked the gates to contain him, to buy time. I sent for you because I needed someone who could prove the poisoning without requiring me to expose her parentage. Medical evidence that stands on its own. A case that removes Stephen without revealing the truth that gives him leverage. You are asking me to build a case that saves your daughter without forcing you to admit she is your daughter. Yes. Agnes turned away. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark gardens. The gates were invisible in the distance, but she knew they were there, locked, enclosing them all in a prison of the Duke's making. I cannot leave. No, I cannot ignore what I know. And if I stay, I am complicit in the same lie that is killing her. He crossed to stand beside her. They did not touch, but she could feel the heat of him in the cold room. I am not asking you to lie. I am asking you to give me a third option. Proof that makes the truth unnecessary. Evidence so clear that Stephen is removed and Rose is safe without the courts ever needing to know who she is. Agnes looked at his reflection in the glass. And if I cannot build that case, then I will speak the truth and pray the system does not punish me for waiting 7 years to do so. But I would rather not gamble my daughter's life on the mercy of a court that has never shown mercy to men like me. She turned to face him. Men like you. Men who love the wrong women. Men who father children they cannot claim. Men who are trapped between the system they were born into and the people they would burn it down to protect. Agnes felt a shift in her understanding. She thought of her father, of the titles she had walked away from, of the system that had made her defer to his misdiagnosis until it was too late to save him. I will build your case, but I will do it my way. And if Stephen discovers what I am doing, I will not go gently. I would not expect you to. She held his gaze. And when this is over, when Rose is safe and Stephen is gone, you will tell her the truth. Not because you are forced to, but because she deserves to know that her father loved her enough to fight for her. Something in his face cracked. He nodded once. Yes. Agnes walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the latch. The gates stay locked. Yes, good. Because if Stephen tries to leave, I want him trapped inside these walls with nowhere to run. She left the study and climbed the stairs to her room. The vial of poison was still on the Duke's desk. The evidence was beginning to accumulate. And for the first time since she had arrived at Hatherley, Agnes Thorne felt the terrible weight of what she had agreed to do. She was not just treating a patient. She was dismantling a conspiracy. And the man who had locked the gates was not her captor. He was her ally. Whether that made her a healer or a fool, she would discover soon enough. The days that followed developed a rhythm shaped by surveillance and growing trust. Agnes monitored every preparation Rose consumed. She kept a detailed log with times, ingredients, and symptoms. Mrs. Liddell began saving samples of the clean tonics she prepared in the mornings, sealing them in small bottles, dating them with careful script, and hiding them in the back of the larder behind the dried beans. Rose improved on days when Agnes intercepted Stephen's tonic and replaced it with her own preparation. The child's color returned. Her appetite strengthened. She began to smile more readily and ask questions about the herbs Agnes used in the still room. What is this one? Chamomile. It helps with sleep and stomach pain. And this, valerian root. It calms the mind. Can I help? Agnes looked at the small face turned up toward her with such earnest hope. Yes, you can help me label these bottles. Can you write your letters? Some of them. Then we will practice together. Rose's laughter in the still room became a sound Agnes found herself listening for. The child was bright and curious and desperately hungry for attention that was not measured through the lens of illness. Agnes taught her the names of herbs, showed her how to measure and mix, let her crush dried lavender in a mortar, while Agnes prepared tinctures at the workbench. Damien appeared in the doorway one afternoon and stood watching them in silence. Rose looked up and smiled. Miss Thorne is teaching me to be a physician. Is she? Yes, I know 7 herbs now, and I can write their names. Most of them. He met Agnes's eyes over the child's head. The expression on his face was unguarded for once. Grateful, devastated, hopeful. That is an excellent beginning. Rose returned to her work. Damien remained in the doorway. Agnes continued measuring tincture, as though his presence did not affect her, but her hands were aware of him. Her pulse was aware. The air in the still room felt different when he was near. He left without speaking again. But that night, when Agnes needed hot water at 2 a.m. to prepare a remedy for Rose's lingering cough, he was the one who brought it. She opened the door to her workroom to find him standing in the corridor, with a heavy basin in his hands. Steam rose from the surface. He was in shirt sleeves, his coat discarded somewhere in the haste of the errand. Mrs. Liddell is asleep. I heard you moving about. You should not be carrying that yourself. It is only water. He stepped into the room. The basin was heavier than he had anticipated. He stumbled slightly on the threshold. Agnes moved without thinking, her hands closing over the rim to steady it. Their fingers overlapped. The water between them trembled, but did not spill. They stood frozen, the basin suspended between them, steam rising into the small space that separated their faces. His hands were warm beneath hers, steady now, but he did not release the basin. She did not withdraw. Careful, she said quietly. Yes. They lowered the basin together to the workbench. Her hands slipped free. He stepped back. The distance between them felt both necessary and unbearable. Thank you. He nodded, turned to leave, paused in the doorway. She is better. Yes, because of you. Because Stephen's tonic has not reached her in 6 days. Because you have been standing between her and the thing that was killing her. Do not diminish what you have done. He left before she could respond. Agnes stared at the basin of water. The surface was still now, smooth, reflecting the candlelight in soft gold. Her hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against the workbench until they steadied. The next morning, a cup of tea appeared outside the still room door. Still warm, no note. Agnes wrapped her hands around it and understood the message. Protection offered without words, without requiring acknowledgement, without demanding anything in return. She drank the tea and returned to her work. But Stephen had noticed the increased scrutiny. She saw it in the way he watched her when she entered the kitchen, in the way his smile sharpened when she asked Mrs. Liddell questions about ingredient sources, in the small adjustments he made to his routine, preparing the tonic earlier, delivering it himself, ensuring it reached Rose's room before Agnes could intercept it. On the 9th day, Agnes arrived at the still room to find her workspace subtly disturbed, nothing missing. But the bottles had been moved, the papers on her desk rearranged. Someone had searched the room while she was with Rose. The message was clear. He knew she was watching, and he was watching back. That evening she found a second cup of tea outside her door. This one was cold. She poured it into a sample vial and tested it in the still room. The reagent turned dark, antimony. Stephen had poisoned her tea. Agnes sealed the vial and added it to the growing collection of evidence. She did not drink anything she had not prepared herself after that, did not eat anything that had not been served to the entire household. She moved through Hatherley like a woman walking on ice, aware that one wrong step could send her through the surface, into the dark water below. But she did not stop. She continued testing, continued documenting, continued building the case that would free Damien from the trap of his own silence. And at night, when Rose was asleep and the house was quiet, she sat in the child's room with her logbook open on her lap and recorded every detail, every symptom, every improvement, every day that passed without Stephen's poison reaching the girl's bloodstream. Damien kept vigil on the opposite side of the bed. They did not speak, but the quiet between them was no longer hollow. It was full of shared purpose, shared fear, shared determination that this child would survive. On the 12th night, Rose woke from a nightmare and reached for Agnes's hand. Agnes held it until the child's breathing steadied and sleep returned. When she looked up, Damien was watching her with an expression she could not name. She trusts you. She should not. I am a stranger. You are the person who made the pain stop. That is not a small thing. Agnes smoothed the blanket over Rose's sleeping form. I have not made it stop. I have only interrupted it. Stephen is still here, still waiting, still preparing tonics I cannot always intercept. This is not over, but she is alive, and she is better. And that is because of you. Agnes met his eyes across the bed. It is because of Mrs. Liddell, because of the household staff who have started watching Stephen without being asked, because of you, locking the gates and giving me time to build the proof we need. I am only one part of this. You are the part that asked the questions no one else asked. She looked down at Rose's sleeping face. My father died because I did not ask the questions I should have asked. I will not make that mistake again. Damien's voice was quiet. What happened? He misdiagnosed himself. Fever. He said it was exhaustion. I saw the symptoms and I recognized them later. Too late. I did not challenge him because he was the physician, and I was his assistant. I deferred, and he died. That was not your failure. It was my silence, and silence is complicity. I know that now. He reached across the bed. His hand hovered over hers for a moment, then settled gently on top of it. The contact was warm and deliberate, and entirely unlike the accidental touch over the water basin. You are not silent now. No, I am not. They sat that way until the candle burned low, his hand covering hers, Rose sleeping between them. The evidence mounting in the still room below, and the gates locked around them all, holding them inside the crucible where truth would finally be forced into the light. On the 14th night, Rose suffered a severe episode. Agnes had been delayed in the village, called to attend a tenant's wife in difficult labor. She returned to Hatherley after dark to find the household in quiet panic. Rose had received her evening tonic 3 hours earlier. Stephen had delivered it himself, smiling, to the maid who brought it to the child's room. No one had thought to question it. No one had known Agnes would be late. By the time Agnes reached the sick room, Rose was writhing in pain, vomiting, feverish. Her small body curled around the agony in her stomach. Agnes worked through the night. Activated charcoal to bind the poison. Cool cloths to bring down the fever. Small sips of water to prevent dehydration. She did not leave the bedside, did not sleep, did not stop moving, except to check the child's pulse and breathing. Damien kept vigil on the opposite side of the bed. His face was a mask of controlled terror. He held Rose's hand when the pain was worst, spoke to her in a low voice, promised her things would be better soon, lied with the desperation of a man who had no other comfort to offer. At 3 a.m, the fever broke. Rose's breathing steadied. The vomiting stopped. She opened her eyes, gray and exhausted and frighteningly clear. She looked at Damien, focused on his face with the intensity of a child who had just walked through fire and found someone waiting on the other side. Papa. Agnes's hand stopped. She set down the cloth she had been using to cool the child's forehead and stared at Rose's face in the candlelight. The gray eyes, the line of the jaw, the shape of the mouth. Then she looked at Damien. The resemblance was unmistakable, not obvious in daylight when social performance masked the features. But here, stripped of pretense, exhausted and raw, the connection was undeniable. Rose's eyes drifted closed. Sleep claimed her again, but the word hung in the air between them like a confession. Agnes spoke carefully. The resemblance is quite striking, Your Grace, especially the eyes. Damien went rigid. His hand was still covering Rose's. He did not withdraw it, did not look away from his daughter's sleeping face. You knew. I am a diagnostician. I observe. How long? Since the first week. The way you watch her. The way you keep vigil. Guardians do not love like that. Fathers do. He finally looked at her. His face was stripped of every defense. If you leave, I am not leaving. If you speak, I will not speak. Not until you are ready. But I need you to understand what I now understand. You cannot act because acting requires you to claim her. And claiming her confirms Stephen's allegation and risks losing her to the courts. You are trapped between the truth that could save her and the lie that is killing her. And the only way out is proof that makes your silence unnecessary. Can you build that proof? Agnes looked at the child sleeping between them, at the evidence she had been collecting for 2 weeks, at the vials in the still room, and the logbook documenting every symptom and every day of improvement when the poison was kept away. Yes, but I need time, and I need you to trust me. I already trust you. I have trusted you since the day you asked to examine the tonic. Then trust me now when I tell you that the answer is not more silence. The answer is building a case so undeniable that the truth becomes irrelevant. Stephen is removed for poisoning. Rose is safe. And what you choose to tell her after that is between you and your daughter. Damien's hand was still covering Rose's. Agnes placed her hand palm up on the bedsheet between them. An offering, not a demand. He looked at her hand, at her face, at the woman who had walked into his house 2 weeks ago, and asked the questions that were dismantling everything. He covered her hand with his free one, held it. The contact was warm and firm and spoke everything the words had not yet said. They sat that way until dawn, Rose sleeping, their hands joined across her body, the evidence mounting, the trap closing, and the understanding between them that they were no longer fighting this battle separately. They were fighting it together, and that changed everything. The days after Rose's crisis took on a new intensity. Agnes carried both truths now, the poison and the parentage, and the weight of them sharpened her focus. She built the case methodically. Symptom logs spanning 21 days. Comparative samples from Mrs. Liddell. Clean preparations that caused no distress versus the tonic recipe Stephen provided. Documentation of Rose's improvement on clean days and decline when Stephen's tonic reached her. She worked in the still room with the door locked. Kept the evidence hidden in a compartment beneath the floorboards she had discovered while searching for additional storage. Tested every sample twice to eliminate doubt. Mrs. Liddell's guilt had transformed into something fiercer. The cook no longer simply saved samples. She tested her own preparations against Stephen's recipe, confirmed the differences, sealed and dated each bottle with the precision of someone building a legal case. 46 days documented, she told Agnes one morning. 46 days of proof that the child improves when she does not receive his tonic. It will be enough. Will it? Or will the courts ask why we did not act sooner? Agnes met the cook's eyes. We will tell them the truth, that we were building proof strong enough to overcome the word of a gentleman, that we were protecting a child while gathering evidence, that we did not have the luxury of acting on suspicion alone. Mrs. Liddell nodded, but her hands shook when she sealed the next sample. The burden of complicity, even unwitting complicity, was not easily set down. Stephen escalated. He appeared in the still room one afternoon while Agnes was working. She had not heard him approach. He simply materialized in the doorway with his charming smile and watchful eyes. Miss Thorne, you spend a great deal of time in here. My work requires it, of course, though I wonder if your work requires quite so much. Scrutiny of household preparations. Agnes set down the bottle she had been labeling. I examine everything that affects the child's health. That is what I was hired to do. Indeed. And you have been very thorough. Some might say excessively so. I do not concern myself with what some might say. He stepped into the room. The space felt smaller with him in it. He moved to the workbench and picked up one of her logbooks, flipped through the pages with casual interest. Detailed records. Impressive. Though I notice you have been documenting Rose's tonics with particular attention, because they precede her symptoms with consistent regularity. Interesting theory. He set the logbook down. Tell me, Miss Thorne. Or should I say Lady Agnes? Her pulse quickened, but her expression did not change. I have not used that title in 3 years. No, you walked away from it, from your family, from a barony, all to practice medicine in village cottages. Your father would have been so proud. Oh wait, your father is dead. A fever, was it not? Tragic, especially for a physician to succumb to something so common. Agnes felt her hands curl into fists beneath the table. What do you want, Mr. Ashworth? Only to ensure we understand each other. You are building a case against me. I am aware of it, and I want you to know that if you speak against me, if you present your carefully documented evidence to anyone outside this household, I will ensure the courts know exactly who you are. The disgraced daughter of a baron who abandoned her title to play healer, a woman with no credibility, no standing, no authority beyond what the Duke of Hatherley granted when he brought you into his household. He leaned closer. And the courts will find it very interesting that a duke brought a disgraced noblewoman into his home to care for a child he claims is his ward. They will wonder what other secrets he is hiding. They will investigate. And when they do, Rose's parentage will be exposed. The guardianship petition will succeed, and I will become her legal guardian. The man you are accusing of poisoning her will be granted legal authority over her life. Agnes stood. She was smaller than him, but she did not step back. You have just confirmed you know about the guardianship petition, and you have just threatened the person examining the child's medicine. In a corridor where sound carries, Stephen's smile faltered. He turned. Behind him in the doorway, Mrs. Liddell, the housekeeper, 2 footmen. They had heard everything. Stephen recovered quickly. A misunderstanding. You were threatening Miss Thorne, Mrs. Liddell said quietly. We all heard it, and we will all remember it when the time comes. Stephen looked at each of them in turn, calculated, reassessed. His smile returned, but it was thinner now. Sharp, of course. A misunderstanding. I apologize if my words were poorly chosen. He left the still room. His footsteps echoed down the corridor. The 4 witnesses remained. The housekeeper spoke first. We will testify to what we heard. Thank you. Do you have enough? Enough to prove it? Agnes thought of the vials beneath the floorboards, the logbooks, Mrs. Liddell's samples. 46 days of documented proof. Yes, I have enough. Then finish it, before he tries something worse. The servants dispersed. Agnes returned to her workbench. Her hands were quivering. She pressed them flat against the wood until they stilled. That evening, Damien appeared at her door. She let him into the still room and locked the door behind him. Stephen confronted me in the corridor. He threatened to expose Rose's parentage if I act against him. I know, Mrs. Liddell told me. The household is ready to testify. To what? To his threat. To the pattern they have observed. To the fact that Rose improves when his tonic does not reach her. We have witnesses now, not just evidence. People who will speak. Damien crossed to the window, looked out at the dark gardens. If I gather them, if I present the case, if I accuse him publicly, he will retaliate by exposing Rose. Not if the evidence is strong enough to make her parentage irrelevant. You remove him for attempted murder. The poisoning is proved medically. Rose's identity never needs to enter the conversation. And if the courts ask why I waited, why I allowed him to remain in the household while he was poisoning her, you tell them the truth, that you suspected but needed proof, that you brought in a physician to build that proof, that you acted the moment the evidence was undeniable. He turned to face her. You are asking me to trust the system that has never protected men like me. I am asking you to trust the evidence, and the people who will stand beside you when you present it. Damien studied her face. You have changed since you arrived. How? You are no longer asking permission. You are telling me what must be done, because I know what must be done, and I know you are strong enough to do it. You locked the gates. You sent for me. You have been protecting Rose the only way you knew how. But the time for protection through silence is over. The time for truth has come. He crossed to where she stood. They were close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the fear, the desperate hope that she was right. If this fails, it will not fail. I will not allow it to fail. You cannot control the courts. No, but I can control the evidence. And the evidence is unimpeachable. Stephen poisoned Rose. We can prove it. And once we prove it, he is finished. Damien reached out and took her hand. Not across a bed this time. Not over a basin of water. But here, in her workspace, where she had built the case that would save his daughter. Thank you. For what? For asking the questions I was too afraid to ask. For staying when you could have left. For showing me that the truth is not a weapon to be feared. It is a tool to be used. Agnes tightened her grip on his hand. Then use it. Gather the household. Present the evidence. Claim your daughter. And let the system reckon with a man who chose honesty when he no longer needed to. He nodded, released her hand, turned toward the door. Damien. He looked back. When this is over, when Rose is safe, I would like to stay. Something in his expression cracked open. As Rose's physician, as whatever you need me to be. He crossed back to her in 3 strides, cupped her face in his hands, kissed her forehead with a tenderness that felt like a vow. I need you to be exactly what you are. Then he was gone, and Agnes was alone in the still room with the evidence beneath the floorboards, and the certainty that tomorrow everything would change. Damien gathered the household the next evening in the great hall. Not the magistrate, not the courts, not the institutions that had failed Rose for 7 years. Just the people who lived inside Hatherley's walls. Every servant, every tenant who had come for the quarterly accounts, the housekeeper, the footman, Mrs. Liddell, and Agnes standing at the front with her logbook. and the vials of evidence arranged on the table before her. Stephen stood near the back. His expression was calm, confident. He believed the system would protect him, that a gentleman's word would outweigh a woman's evidence, that the household would defer to rank and remain silent. He was wrong. Damien spoke first. His voice was steady, controlled. But beneath the control was something raw and unbreakable. I have gathered you here because a crime has been committed inside these walls. A crime that has continued for 18 months. A crime that I suspected, but could not prove until Miss Thorne arrived and asked the questions no one else asked. He gestured to Agnes. She stepped forward and opened her logbook. Rose Ashworth has been systematically poisoned with antimony. The poison was administered through her evening tonic. The symptoms, weight loss, digestive distress, weakness, were misdiagnosed as consumption by 4 physicians who did not examine the preparations she consumed. I examined them, I tested them, and I found antimony in doses calculated to sicken, but not kill. She held up the first vial. This is a sample of the tonic Rose received 16 days ago. The reagent test confirms the presence of antimony. She set it down and picked up the second vial. This is a sample of the tonic Mrs. Liddell prepared without supervision. Clean. No antimony. No reaction. She opened the logbook. I have documented 46 days of Rose's symptoms. On days when she received the clean tonic, she improved. On days when she received the contaminated tonic, she worsened. The pattern is absolute. Mrs. Liddell stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. I prepared Rose's tonic every evening for 18 months. I used the recipe Mr. Stephen Ashworth provided. I did not question it because he is a gentleman, and I am a cook. I did not know the recipe contained poison until Miss Thorne asked me to prepare a sample without his supervision. I compared them. I tested them, and I have been saving samples ever since. She placed a wooden box on the table. Inside were 46 sealed bottles, each one labeled with a date and the words clean preparation, no antimony. These are the tonics I made without his interference. They did not sicken the child. His recipe did. I am the person who mixed the poison. I am the person who gave it to her. And I am the person who will testify that I did so under his instruction. The housekeeper spoke next. I witnessed Mr. Ashworth threaten Miss Thorne in the corridor 4 days ago. He said if she spoke against him, he would ensure the courts knew she was a disgraced noblewoman. He confirmed he knew about the guardianship petition. He confirmed he understood the stakes, and he threatened the person examining the child's medicine. The 2 footmen confirmed it, word for word. Stephen finally spoke. His voice was still charming, still controlled. Your Grace, this is a misunderstanding. Miss Thorne has misinterpreted. No. Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. Miss Thorne has documented a pattern of poisoning that spans 18 months. Mrs. Liddell has provided comparative samples that prove the contamination was in your recipe. The household has witnessed your threats. The evidence is undeniable. Stephen's smile sharpened. And what will the courts say when they learn you have been concealing the truth about Rose's parentage for 7 years? When they discover she is not your ward, but your illegitimate daughter? When they understand that your excessive attachment is not eccentricity, but paternal devotion to a child you refuse to claim? The room went silent. Damien looked at Stephen, at the man who had been poisoning his daughter, at the trap that had held him silent for so long. And then he looked at Rose. She was standing near the door with a maid's hand on her shoulder, watching her father, waiting. Damien spoke 5 sentences, each one deliberate, each one a choice. Rose is my daughter. Her mother was Ellen Brooke. I have hidden this for 7 years because I was afraid of what it would cost. It cost more to hide it than it would have cost to speak it. Miss Thorne's evidence proves that my silence allowed a child to be poisoned. I will not be silent anymore. Rose's face transformed. The maid's hand tightened on her shoulder. Mrs. Liddell pressed a hand to her mouth. Stephen stared. You have just confirmed my allegation. The courts will. The courts will see medical evidence of attempted murder. They will see a household willing to testify. They will see a man who threatened a physician for asking questions. And they will see a father who chose honesty even when he no longer needed to. Because the evidence stands without my confession. You are finished either way. I chose to speak the truth because it is the right thing to do, not because it is strategically necessary. The household moved as one. The footmen stepped forward and took Stephen by the arms. The housekeeper opened the door, and Stephen Ashworth was removed from Hatherley by the same people who had maintained the fiction for 7 years. The system that had enabled silence now enabled truth. When the door closed behind him, the room remained silent. Rose crossed to Damien, looked up at him with gray eyes that were his eyes. "Papa?" He knelt, took her small hands in his. "Yes. Why did you not tell me?" "Because I was afraid, and I was wrong to be afraid. I am sorry." Rose threw her arms around his neck. He held her, and for the first time in 7 years, Damien Ashworth held his daughter in front of witnesses and did not hide what she was to him. Agnes watched from across the room. Mrs. Liddell stood beside her. "You did it," the cook said quietly. "We did it. What happens now?" "Now the magistrate is called. Stephen is charged, and the courts decide whether a duke's honesty is enough to overcome 7 years of lies. And if it is not," Agnes looked at Damien holding Rose, at the household standing witness, at the evidence on the table that had dismantled a conspiracy. "Then we fight, and we do not stop fighting until she is safe." Mrs. Liddell nodded. "I can live with that." After, the great hall emptied slowly. The household dispersed with the quiet efficiency of people who had just witnessed something that would reshape their world. Rose was taken to bed by the housekeeper, exhausted, confused, but smiling in a way Agnes had never seen before. Damien remained in the hall. Agnes found him standing at the window, looking out at the dark gardens. "The gates are open," he turned. "Yes. You could have kept them locked, kept Stephen contained until the magistrate arrived. I could have, but I chose not to. He is gone. The household knows the truth, and I am done trapping people inside lies." Agnes crossed to where he stood. "The courts will investigate. Yes, they will ask questions. I will answer them. They may not rule in your favor. Then I will appeal. And if the appeal fails, I will fight in every venue available until Rose is safe. But I will not hide anymore. I will not ask her to hide, and I will not regret speaking the truth." Agnes studied his face. The exhaustion was still there, but the fear was gone, replaced by something steady and unbreakable. "You spoke the truth when you did not need to. I needed to. Not strategically, but morally. You showed me that. You walked away from a barony because you refused to be complicit in a system that valued rank over principle. I have spent 7 years trapped inside that system. Tonight I chose to step outside it. Because of you. I only provided the evidence. You provided considerably more than evidence." A hush settled between them, not empty, not uncertain, but full of everything they had not yet said. "Stay," he said quietly. "That is not a medical recommendation. No, it is a request, from a man without strategies to a woman without armor." Agnes looked at him, at the man who had locked the gates to protect his daughter, who had trusted a stranger with a truth that could destroy him, who had chosen honesty when he no longer needed to, because it was the right thing to do. "I told you to open the gates. Then ask me." "I am asking." She grabbed his lapel and pulled him toward her. The kiss was fierce, weeks of restraint breaking. Her hands fisted in his shirt. His arms came around her waist. They stood in the great hall. He had just claimed his daughter in front of witnesses, and kissed like two people who had fought their way through fire to find each other on the other side. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I am staying," Agnes said. "Good, but not as Rose's physician." "Then as what?" "As whatever we decide together. Without gates, without lies, without strategies." He touched her face. "I can live with that." They stood together in the empty hall, the evidence still on the table, the gates open, the truth spoken, and the future waiting to be built from the wreckage of the past. 3 weeks later, the still room was warm with afternoon sun. Agnes worked at the bench, preparing a tincture for the blacksmith's wife. Rose sat on a stool beside her, crushing dried lavender in a mortar. The child's color had returned. Her appetite was strong. She had gained weight, and her laughter had become a constant presence in the house. The door opened. Damien entered carrying a plant specimen wrapped in cloth. "You asked for yarrow from the south garden." Agnes looked up. "Yes, Achillea millefolium. Did you find it?" He unwrapped the cloth. Agnes examined the plant, sighed. "This is Achillea tarmica. They look identical. To you. They are completely different species." Rose looked up from her work. "Papa, Agnes says you are botanically hopeless." "Agnes is correct about most things. It is extremely inconvenient. Agnes took the wrong specimen from his hand. Their fingers closed together on the stem. She did not release it immediately. He did not withdraw. I will show you the difference. Again, I am a slow learner, I have noticed. Rose crushed lavender between their silence. The scent filled the still room, sweet and clean and alive. Damien's thumb moved against Agnes's fingers. A small gesture, deliberate. The magistrate has closed the investigation. Stephen has been charged. The courts have accepted my guardianship. Agnes's hand tightened on his. Rose is safe. Yes. Then it is finished. No. It is beginning. He released the plant stem, but kept hold of her hand. Rose looked up and smiled. Are you staying, Agnes? Yes. Forever. Agnes looked at Damien, at the man who had chosen truth over strategy, at the child who had called her by name and trusted her with small hands and enormous hope. Yes. Forever. Rose returned to her lavender. Damien released Agnes's hand and moved to examine the bottles on her shelf. The still room settled into comfortable quiet, work and presence, and the knowledge that they had built something worth keeping. Winter came. Agnes walked through the estate gates toward the village with her medical bag over her shoulder. A tenant farmer's wife was expecting. The birth was weeks away, but Agnes had promised to check on her progress. Damien fell into step beside her, carrying the heavier case. You do not need to come. I know. It is a routine examination. I know. You have estate business. It can wait. They walked in silence. The gates were behind them, open, unremarked, part of the landscape now. From the house came a shout. Rose's voice, full and strong, running the gallery at full speed. The sound of a child who had discovered she could run without stopping, without pain, without fear. Agnes paused, listened. She sounds well. She sounds like a child who is no longer being poisoned. That is your achievement. It is Mrs. Liddell's achievement. And yours. I provided the evidence. You provided considerably more than evidence. Agnes resumed walking. He matched her pace. The village lay ahead. The work waiting. The life they were building together from honesty and choice, and the refusal to be silent in the face of injustice. They walked toward the village. Together, visible, chosen, and behind them, the gate stood open. No longer a prison. No longer a trap. Just iron and hinges and the space between inside and outside where two people had once kissed and chosen each other. The space where everything had changed and where everything had begun.